The gunshot cracked through the morning air like thunder, and Olivia Dawson pressed herself against the stagecoach wall as masked riders circled them like vultures descending on prey. "Everybody out!" The leader's voice was rough as sandpaper, his face hidden behind a dirty red bandana. "Nice and slow, hands where I can see them." Olivia's fingers trembled as she gathered her skirts and stepped down onto the dusty Arizona road. The year was 1883, and she had traveled all the way from Boston with everything she owned sewn into the lining of her trunk. 3 years of teaching piano had earned her enough to start fresh in the mining town of Oatman, where her late aunt had left her a small boarding house. Now, as 5 armed men ransacked the stagecoach, that dream felt as distant as the Massachusetts coastline. The driver, an older man named Chester, kept his hands raised high. The other passenger, a merchant traveling with fabric samples, stood beside Olivia, his face pale as milk. The bandits worked with practiced efficiency, tearing through luggage and demanding valuables from each traveler. "Money, jewelry, anything worth taking," the leader barked, moving down the line with a burlap sack. The merchant surrendered his wallet without protest. Chester reluctantly handed over a leather pouch that jingled with coins. Then the bandit stood before Olivia. She was 22 years old, with auburn hair pinned in a modest bun beneath her traveling bonnet, and green eyes that now brimmed with unshed tears. Her reticule hung from her wrist, containing every cent she had left after purchasing her stagecoach ticket, exactly $43.18. "Well?" The bandit's eyes were cold above the bandana. Olivia's hands shook as she unfastened the small bag and emptied it into his sack. She watched her future disappear into that filthy cloth, each coin a dream crumbling to dust. The boarding house would need repairs. She would need supplies, food, firewood for the approaching winter. Now she had nothing. The bandits finished their work in minutes. They took the strong box from beneath the driver's seat, stripped the horses of their decorative tack, and even claimed Chester's pocket watch, a gift from his late wife. Then they were gone, riding hard toward the rocky hills that rose like jagged teeth against the bright Arizona sky. Olivia sank to her knees in the dirt, no longer able to hold back the tears. Everything she had worked for, saved for, dreamed of, was gone. The merchant helped her to her feet, but his sympathy was hollow. He had lost money too, but his home and family waited in Oatman. She had no one. "We should keep moving," Chester said grimly, climbing back onto the driver's bench. "Those hills are no place to linger. Mountain lion country, and worse." They traveled another hour in heavy silence before the stagecoach lurched violently to one side. Chester cursed as he fought to control the horses. A wheel had hit a deep rut, and when they finally stopped to inspect the damage, the news was grim. The wheel had cracked and the axle was bent. They would not make it to Oatman without repairs. "There's a trading post about 2 miles north," Chester said, squinting at the sun. "Fellow named Pike Voss runs it. He might have what we need, or at least let us send word to town for help." Pike Voss. The name meant nothing to Olivia then, just another stranger in a strange land. She had no idea that everything in her life was about to change. They walked, Chester leading the horses slowly while Olivia and the merchant followed on foot. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly around them, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. Saguaro cacti stood like silent sentinels, and the mountains in the distance shimmered with heat. Olivia's feet ached in her button-up boots, and dust coated her dark green traveling dress until it looked almost brown. When they finally saw the trading post, it looked like a mirage. A sturdy log building sat in a small valley between 2 hills, with a corral out back and smoke rising from a stone chimney. A hand-painted sign declared it Voss Trading Post, and beneath that, in smaller letters, supplies, repairs, fair prices. A man emerged from the building as they approached, and Olivia felt her breath catch. He was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the doorway. His hair was dark brown and fell past his collar, tied back with a leather cord. He wore a simple flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle from years of hard work. His face was tanned and weathered, with a strong jaw darkened by several days of stubble, and eyes the color of storm clouds that seemed to take in everything at once. "Trouble?" His voice was deep and calm, the kind of voice that made you feel safer just hearing it. Chester explained about the robbery and the broken wheel. Pike Voss listened without interrupting, his gray eyes moving from the stagecoach to each traveler. When his gaze fell on Olivia, she felt heat rise to her cheeks, despite everything that had happened. There was something in the way he looked at her, not intrusive or improper, but intensely present, as if she were the only person standing in that dusty yard. "I can fix the wheel," Pike said. "Take me a few hours, maybe longer. You're all welcome to come inside, get some water, and rest." He looked at Olivia again. "Madam, you look about ready to drop." She wanted to protest, to maintain her dignity and composure, but the truth was she felt hollowed out, exhausted not just from the walk, but from the morning's trauma. She nodded gratefully and followed him inside. The trading post was surprisingly well organized. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything from canned goods to mining equipment. A pot-bellied stove radiated warmth despite the heat outside, and a long wooden counter divided the retail space from what appeared to be Pike's living quarters in the back. Everything was clean and orderly, not what Olivia had expected from a lone mountain man living in the wilderness. Pike brought them water in tin cups, cold from a spring-fed well behind the building. Olivia drank deeply, the water cutting through the dust in her throat. The merchant settled into a chair by the stove, already dozing from exhaustion and shock. Chester went back outside to help Pike assess the damage to the stagecoach. Left alone in the trading post, Olivia finally allowed herself to fully absorb what had happened. She was stranded in the Arizona territory with no money, no resources, and no clear path forward. The boarding house in Oatman would need to generate income immediately if she had any hope of survival. But how could she stock a kitchen with no funds? How could she make even the simplest repairs? She pressed her hands to her face, fighting fresh tears. She had been so brave when she left Boston, so determined to forge a new life. Her parents had died 3 years earlier, within months of each other, her father from consumption and her mother from heartbreak, leaving Olivia alone in a city that held only sad memories. The letter from her aunt's lawyer had seemed like providence, a chance to start over in a place where no one knew her as the tragic orphan girl. Now that chance was slipping through her fingers like desert sand. "Madam?" Olivia looked up to find Pike standing in the doorway, hat in his hands. Up close, he was even more imposing, but there was a gentleness in his expression that contradicted his formidable size. "I did not mean to startle you," he said. "Chester mentioned what happened with the robbery. I'm sorry you went through that." "Thank you." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It is just money, I suppose. No one was hurt." Pike's jaw tightened. "Money is never just money, especially out here. Those bandits, they take more than coins. They take people's hopes." He crossed to the counter and leaned against it, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. "You were heading to Oatman?" "Yes. My aunt passed away and left me her boarding house. I was supposed to arrive today, start setting things in order." She tried to smile but failed. "I suppose I will still arrive. Just penniless and helpless." "You do not strike me as helpless." The certainty in his voice surprised her. "You do not know me. I know you did not fall apart when guns were pointed at you this morning. I know you walked 2 miles in this heat wearing those ridiculous city boots without complaining once. That's not helpless, Miss Dawson, Olivia Dawson." "Pike Voss." He extended his hand, and when Olivia placed hers in it, she was struck by the strength in his grip, tempered by obvious care not to hurt her. His palm was calloused from hard work, warm and solid and real. Something sparked between them in that simple touch, something Olivia had never felt before, a recognition that bypassed words and logic entirely. Pike seemed to feel it too, because he held her hand a moment longer than strictly proper before releasing it. He cleared his throat. "Miss Dawson, I might have a solution to your immediate problem, if you will hear me out." Hope fluttered in her chest. "Please. I do a fair amount of business with the boarding house in Oatman. Your aunt, Mrs. Harriet Brennan, she used to send folks my way for supplies, and I would give them good rates. We had an arrangement that worked well for both of us." He paused as if weighing his words. "I could extend you credit enough to get the boarding house operational. You could pay me back once you have income from lodgers." Olivia stared at him. "You would do that? For a complete stranger?" "You're not a complete stranger. You are Harriet Brennan's niece, and Harriet was good people." That is recommendation enough? He smiled slightly, and the expression transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. Besides, I'm a decent judge of character. I think you are good for it. I am. The words came out fierce and certain. I promise you, Mr. Voss, I will repay every penny, with interest. Pike, he corrected, and we can discuss terms later. For now, let me finish fixing that wheel so you can get to Oatman before dark. He turned to leave, but Olivia called after him. Pike. He looked back over his shoulder. Thank you, truly. You have given me back my hope. Something shifted in his expression, a warmth that made her heart beat faster. You are welcome, Olivia. The use of her given name should have felt too familiar, too forward, but instead, it felt perfectly natural, as if they had known each other far longer than an hour. Olivia watched him walk back outside, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the bright doorway, and wondered at the strange turn her day had taken. The merchant woke from his nap and struck up a conversation about mining prospects in the territory. Olivia responded politely, but her mind kept drifting to the man working outside. Through the window, she could see Pike and Chester wrestling the damaged wheel off its axle. Pike's muscles flexed beneath his shirt as he worked, and Olivia found herself staring longer than was proper. There was something mesmerizing about watching him move, the easy confidence of a man completely comfortable in his own strength and skill. She forced herself to look away, cheeks burning. What was wrong with her? She had just been robbed, was practically destitute, and here she was mooning over a mountain man like some foolish schoolgirl. But even as she scolded herself, her eyes drifted back to the window. 2 hours later, Pike declared the wheel repaired. It would hold until Oatman, where Chester could get proper replacement parts. As they prepared to depart, Pike disappeared into the back of the trading post and returned with a canvas bag. Supplies, he said, handing it to Olivia. Coffee, flour, sugar, beans, some salt pork. Enough to get you through a few days until you can make proper arrangements. Pike? I cannot accept. Yes, you can. Consider it part of the credit line we discussed. His gray eyes held hers. You need to eat, Olivia. No point in owning a boarding house if you starve before you can open for business. The practical concern in his voice moved her almost to tears again. When was the last time someone had thought about her needs, her well-being? She took the bag, her fingers brushing his, and that spark ignited again, stronger this time. I will come to Oatman in a few days, Pike said. Check on how you're settling in, discuss repayment terms, if that's acceptable. Yes, the word came out breathier than intended. Yes, that would be very acceptable. He smiled again, and Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest despite the day's hardships. There was something about this man, something solid and true that called to something deep inside her. She climbed back into the stagecoach feeling lighter than she had any right to feel. As they pulled away from the trading post, Olivia looked back through the window. Pike stood in the yard watching them go, one hand raised in farewell. She waved back, and even from a distance she could feel the connection between them, invisible but undeniable. That Pike Voss is good people, Chester said from the driver's bench. Known him about 5 years now. Came out here after the war, wanted to get away from civilization. But he is not like other mountain men, drinking and brawling and causing trouble. Pike, he is steady, reliable. When he gives his word, you can build your house on it. The merchant nodded agreement. I have heard the same. Fair in his dealings, never cheats on weight or measure, rare quality in these parts. Olivia held the canvas bag of supplies on her lap and allowed herself to smile. Perhaps her luck was changing after all. They reached Oatman just as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. The town was larger than Olivia had expected, with a main street lined with wooden buildings and several side streets branching off into residential areas. The mining industry was clearly thriving, evident in the number of rough-looking men moving between saloons and supply stores. It was not Boston, not by any measure, but there was an energy to the place, a sense of possibility that appealed to something in Olivia's spirit. The boarding house stood on a corner lot 2 blocks from the main street. It was a 2-story structure, painted white, with a wide front porch and green shutters that had seen better days. A sign hanging from the porch rail read Brennan Boarding House in faded letters. Olivia's heart clenched as she looked at it. Her aunt had built a life here, had created something lasting in this wild place. Now it was Olivia's responsibility to continue that legacy. The lawyer who had handled her aunt's estate met her at the door. Mr. Pemberton was a thin man with spectacles and a nervous manner, clearly uncomfortable outside his office environment. He handed over the keys and a folder of documents. "Everything is in order, Miss Dawson. The property is yours, free and clear. Your aunt had no debts, which is fortunate. The house needs some work, as you can see, but the structure is sound." He hesitated. "I should mention that several people in town were interested in purchasing the property. If you find yourself overwhelmed and wish to sell, I can put you in touch with potential buyers." "Thank you, Mr. Pemberton, but I have no intention of selling." Olivia's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. "This is my home now." The lawyer departed, and Olivia stood alone in the front hall of her new life. The boarding house smelled of dust and disuse. Her aunt had been ill for several months before her death, and the business had clearly suffered. But beneath the neglect, Olivia could see quality. The floors were solid oak, the walls straight and true. The furniture was well made, if worn. A beautiful banister curved up to the second floor, and she could imagine it polished to a warm gleam. There were 6 guest rooms upstairs, each with a simple bed, dresser, and wash basin. Downstairs held a large dining room, a parlor, a kitchen, and her aunt's personal quarters behind the kitchen. Olivia claimed those rooms for herself, too tired to explore further. She unpacked the supplies Pike had given her and managed to start a fire in the kitchen stove. Soon the smell of coffee filled the air, chasing away some of the musty emptiness. She sat at the kitchen table with her cup of coffee and allowed herself to cry. Not despairing sobs, but the quiet tears of relief and release. She had made it. Despite everything, she was here, in her own home, with a future still possible before her, and she owed that possibility to a mountain man with gray eyes and a generous heart. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work. Olivia cleaned obsessively, scrubbing floors and windows until her hands were raw. She beat dust from curtains, aired out mattresses, and inventoried what supplies remained in the kitchen and linen closets. The previous lodgers had cleared out when her aunt became too ill to maintain the business, but they had left the rooms in reasonable condition. The neighboring shopkeepers proved friendly and helpful. Mrs. Chen, who ran a laundry service, offered to handle the boarding house linens at a reduced rate in exchange for referrals. Mr. Kowalski from the general store explained the local credit system and agreed to extend Olivia a small line of credit for immediate necessities, with the understanding that Pike Voss was backing her. Apparently, Pike's reputation carried significant weight in Oatman. "That man saved my life once," Mr. Kowalski confided as he loaded supplies into a crate for her. "Flash flood came through about 3 years back, caught me and my wagon on the wrong side of the creek. Pike happened to be passing by, waded into that torrent like it was nothing, pulled me and my horses to safety, never asked for payment or even thanks, just tipped his hat and rode on. That is the kind of man he is." Olivia found herself collecting these stories about Pike like precious gems. The blacksmith's wife mentioned how Pike had sat with her sick child through a long night when the doctor could not come. The owner of the dry goods store recalled Pike breaking up a fight outside the saloon, then paying for the damages and buying both brawlers breakfast the next morning to make sure they made peace. Every story painted the picture of a man who was strong but not violent, solitary but not selfish, someone who helped because it was right, not for recognition or reward. Olivia thought about him constantly as she worked, remembering the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, the careful strength in his hands, the way her name sounded in his deep voice. On the 4th day, she was on the front porch repainting the sign when she heard the distinctive sound of a horse approaching. She looked up, brush in hand, and there he was. Pike sat astride a massive bay gelding, his hat tilted against the morning sun. He was wearing clean clothes, a blue shirt that made his eyes look almost silver, and his hair was freshly washed and tied back. He looked like something from a storybook, a frontier hero riding in to save the day, except this was real, and he was here to see her. Olivia set down the brush, suddenly aware that she was wearing her oldest dress covered in paint stains, her hair tied back with a kerchief, and probably had dust on her face. But the way Pike looked at her as he dismounted, you would think she was dressed for a ball. "Morning, Olivia." He tethered his horse to the porch rail. "Looks like you have been busy." "Good morning, Pike." Her heart was racing. Yes, trying to make the place presentable. Would you like to come in? I just made fresh coffee. I would like that very much. He followed her inside, his presence making the hallway seem smaller. Olivia poured coffee with hands that shook slightly, hyper-aware of him sitting at her kitchen table, looking around with interest. You have done wonders with the place, Pike said. I was here once about 6 months ago, and it was not in good shape. Your aunt was already quite ill. Did you know her well? Well enough to respect her. She was tough, fair, did not suffer fools. I imagine you are much like her. Olivia handed him a cup and sat across the table. I hope to be worthy of what she built. They talked for over an hour, covering practical matters like supply schedules and prices, but drifting often into more personal territory. Pike told her about coming west after the war, how he had spent 2 years just wandering the mountains trying to forget what he had seen and done. He spoke carefully about that time, and Olivia understood there were wounds there that had never fully healed. I killed men in that war, he said quietly, staring into his coffee. Good men, bad men, scared boys who should have been home with their families. I did what I was ordered to do, and I did it well, and when it was over, I could not stand to be around people anymore. The noise, the crowds, the expectations. I needed silence. What changed? Olivia asked softly. Nothing changed. I just learned to live with it. Found peace in the mountains, in simple work, in being useful again, in a way that did not involve killing. He looked up, his gray eyes meeting hers. Your aunt gave me my first credit customer when I started the trading post. Said she believed in second chances and fresh starts. That kindness, it meant something. She sounds like a wise woman. She was, and I think she would be proud of what you were doing here. The compliment warmed Olivia more than it should have. I hope so. I am certainly trying. Pike reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. He set it on the table between them. I wanted to give you something. Olivia opened the pouch and gasped. Inside was a single gold coin, a $10 eagle that gleamed in the morning light. Pike, I cannot... Yes, you can. His voice was gentle but firm. I know you said the bandits took everything. This is not charity, Olivia. This is an investment in a business I believe will succeed. Consider it a down payment on all the future supplies you will be ordering from me. She looked from the coin to his face, seeing the sincerity there, the quiet determination. This coin probably represented a significant portion of his own ready cash, yet he was giving it to her without hesitation. The generosity of it, the faith it represented, overwhelmed her defenses. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Why are you being so kind to me? Pike was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough with emotion. When I saw you step off that stagecoach at my trading post, looking so lost and trying so hard to be brave, something in my chest just cracked wide open. I've lived alone for a long time, Olivia, told myself I was content that way, that I did not need anyone. Then you walked into my life and suddenly I could not remember why I ever thought being alone was enough. Olivia's breath caught. Pike, I am not trying to rush you or make you uncomfortable, he continued. Lord knows you have been through enough without me adding pressure, but I believe in honesty, and the honest truth is I cannot stop thinking about you. I ride back to my trading post, and all I see is the empty spaces where you should be. I wake up, and my first thought is whether you are all right, if you need anything, if you are thinking of me even a fraction as much as I am thinking of you. She reached across the table and took his hand, that same spark igniting at the touch. I'm thinking of you, she said, constantly. Probably too much for someone I have only just met. There is no such thing as too much. His fingers closed around hers, strong and warm. Olivia, I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But out here, time moves different. People do not have the luxury of long courtships and proper waiting periods. Life is hard and short, and when something good comes along, you grab it with both hands and hold on. What are you saying? I am saying I would like to court you, properly and respectfully. I would like to spend time getting to know you, helping you build this business, being part of your life. And if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, I would like to see where this goes. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, joy breaking through like sunshine after rain. Yes, she said. Yes, I would like that very much. Pike's smile was like dawn breaking over the mountains, brilliant and full of promise. He stood and came around the table, drawing her to her feet. For a moment they just stood there, hands clasped, looking at each other with wonder, and the beginning of something that felt like forever. "I should let you get back to work," Pike said reluctantly, "but I will be back tomorrow, if that's all right. I thought I could help with some of the heavier repairs. I noticed the porch steps are loose, and that gutter on the north side looks about ready to fall off. You do not have to. I know I do not have to. I want to." He lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so sweet and old-fashioned it made Olivia's heart flutter. "Let me help you, Olivia. Let me be useful in your life." "All right," she agreed. "Tomorrow, then?" He left with obvious reluctance, mounting his horse and turning back 3 times as he rode down the street. Olivia stood on the porch waving until he disappeared from sight, then sank into the rocking chair with the gold coin clutched in her hand. Her whole body felt light, almost floating, as if joy had made her weightless. The next weeks fell into a pattern that felt both natural and miraculous. Pike rode into town every few days, arriving early and staying late, working on repairs and improvements to the boarding house. He fixed the steps, replaced broken shingles, reinforced the porch, and built new shelves in the kitchen. While he worked, Olivia cooked meals for them both, and they would eat together in the kitchen or on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. She learned that Pike was 30 years old, 8 years her senior, and had grown up on a farm in Kentucky. His parents and younger sister had died of cholera when he was 17, and he had joined the army partly for the steady pay and partly because he had no one left to stay home for. After the war, the idea of returning to that empty farm had been unbearable, so he had drifted west with hundreds of other lost souls looking for a fresh start. "I never meant to settle in Arizona," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. "Thought I might keep going to California, try my hand at something by the ocean, but then I found that valley where my trading post is now, and something in me just said, this is home. First time I'd felt that way since before the war." "Do you ever get lonely out there?" Olivia asked. "So far from town, from other people. I used to think I preferred it that way." Pike looked at her, his gray eyes reflecting the sunset colors. "I do not think that anymore." The boarding house was thriving under Olivia's management. Word spread quickly that Brennan Boarding House was open again under new ownership, and soon she had steady lodgers, mostly miners and merchants who needed clean rooms and good meals at fair prices. She proved to be an excellent cook, using the skills her mother had taught her and adapting them to the rougher ingredients available in the territory. Her bread became locally famous, and she started baking extra loaves to sell to the general store. The income allowed her to begin repaying Pike, but he refused to accept anything beyond the actual cost of supplies. "The credit was not about making money off you," he insisted when she tried to add interest. "It was about giving you a chance to succeed. You have done that on your own merit." "But I want to pay you back properly," Olivia argued. "You took a risk on me." "No risk," Pike said simply. "I knew you would make it work. You are the most determined person I have ever met." Their relationship deepened with each visit, each shared meal, each moment spent in comfortable companionship. Pike was unlike any man Olivia had ever known. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, and remembered small details she mentioned in passing. He never tried to take over or suggest she was doing things wrong, but offered help when needed and stepped back when she wanted to handle things herself. He was respectful of her space and reputation, always leaving before dark and never presuming liberties he had not been given. But there was no denying the attraction between them. When Pike's hand brushed hers, when his eyes lingered on her face, when he smiled that rare, warm smile that transformed his serious features, Olivia felt heat race through her veins. She caught herself watching him work, admiring the play of muscles beneath his shirt, the confident way he moved, the gentle strength in his hands. More than once she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch and her skin tingle. 2 months after their first meeting, Pike arrived on a Sunday afternoon with wildflowers he had picked in the mountains. They were a riot of colors, desert marigolds and purple asters and Indian paintbrush arranged in a mason jar with ribbon tied around it. "I know they are not fancy like city flowers," he said, suddenly shy, "but I thought they were pretty, and I thought of you." Olivia took the flowers with hands that trembled. They are beautiful, Pike. The most beautiful flowers anyone has ever given me. He stepped closer, and she could smell pine and leather and something essentially him. Olivia, I need to tell you something. Her heart hammered. What is it? I love you. The words came out rough and certain. I know it is too soon. I know I should wait and be proper about it, but I cannot keep it in anymore. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your determination. I love the way you hum when you cook and how you bite your lip when you are concentrating. I love how you treat everyone with respect, from the richest merchant to the poorest prospector. I love everything about you, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore. Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. I love you too, she whispered. I think I loved you from that first day, when you gave me hope when I had none. You are the best man I have ever known, Pike Voss. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle despite his strength. May I kiss you? Please. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Olivia did not want to pull away. She wanted this more than she had wanted anything in her life. When his lips met hers, it was like coming home. The kiss was sweet and tender, full of restrained passion and promised devotion. His hands remained on her face, holding her as if she were precious and fragile and essential. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Pike rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. I know it is soon, but life is uncertain, and I am certain about you. Marry me, Olivia. Let me spend the rest of my days making you happy. Yes, the word came without hesitation. Yes, Pike, I will marry you. He kissed her again, deeper this time, one arm wrapping around her waist to pull her close. Olivia melted against him, feeling safe and wanted and wholly, completely loved. When they finally separated, both were grinning like fools. When? Pike asked. Tomorrow? Next week? As soon as possible? Olivia laughed, giddy with happiness. Let us give it at least a month, so we can do it properly. I want to make a nice dress, and we should invite the people who have been kind to us. A month, Pike agreed, but not a day longer. I have waited 30 years to find you, Olivia. I do not want to wait any longer than necessary to make you my wife. They were married on a crisp October morning at the small church in Oatman. Olivia wore a dress she had sewn herself from ivory silk Pike had brought from his trading post, with lace at the collar and cuffs. She carried more wildflowers, and her hair was pinned up with pearl combs that had belonged to her mother. She looked beautiful, but no one could tear their eyes from Pike's face as he watched her walk down the aisle. The mountain man, who was always so stoic and controlled, looked like he was about to burst with joy. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. Pike's vows were spoken in a voice thick with emotion, promising to love, honor, and protect Olivia for all his days. Olivia's voice shook as she promised the same, looking into his gray eyes and seeing her whole future reflected there. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Pike kissed her with such tenderness that half the women in attendance began to cry. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, grinning at their assembled friends and neighbors. The reception was held at the boarding house with food and drink and music provided by a fiddler from one of the mining camps. As evening fell and the guests began to depart, Pike swept Olivia into his arms and carried her up the stairs to the room they would now share. He set her down gently and closed the door behind them, and for the first time they were truly alone as husband and wife. I love you, Mrs. Voss, Pike said, pulling the pins from her hair and letting it tumble down around her shoulders. I love you, Mr. Voss, Olivia replied, running her hands over his broad chest. Show me how much. He did, with reverence and passion, gentle strength and tender love. They came together like two halves of a whole, finely united, bodies and hearts and souls intertwining in the most intimate expression of their devotion. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, complete in a way neither had ever been before. Thank you, Olivia whispered against his chest. For what? For that day at your trading post, for the supplies and the credit and the hope, for every kindness since, for loving me. Pike kissed the top of her head. That was the best day of my life, when your stagecoach broke down near my place. I did not know it then, but the woman I had been waiting for my whole life had just walked into it." "You gave me your last coin," Olivia said, remembering that gold eagle, now kept in a special box on her dresser. "You did not have to do that." "It was not my last coin," Pike admitted. "But even if it had been, I would have given it to you. From that first moment, everything I had was yours." They fell asleep in each other's arms, safe and loved and home. The first years of their marriage were full of hard work and deep contentment. Pike split his time between the trading post and Oatman, hiring a local boy to help manage the store so he could spend more time with Olivia. Eventually, they made the decision to sell the trading post and focus entirely on the boarding house, which had become so successful under their joint management that they needed to expand. They added 4 more rooms to the second floor and converted the attic into a private apartment for themselves, giving them more space and privacy while maximizing rental income below. Pike proved to have a good head for business, and together they built the boarding house into one of the most successful establishments in Oatman. But their greatest joy came 3 years into their marriage when Olivia discovered she was pregnant. Pike was beside himself with excitement and worry, hovering over her constantly, carrying anything heavier than a teacup and driving her slightly crazy with his protective concern. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him exasperatedly one afternoon when he tried to stop her from sweeping the porch. "I know that." Pike took the broom from her anyway. "But you are carrying my child, and that makes you infinitely precious. Let me take care of you, Olivia." How could she argue with that? She settled into the rocking chair and let him sweep, watching her mountain man husband attack dust and debris with the same intensity he brought to everything he did. Their son was born on a warm spring morning in 1887. The labor was long and difficult, and Pike paced outside the bedroom door like a caged animal, nearly breaking down the door twice when Olivia cried out. But when the doctor finally emerged with the news that mother and baby were both healthy, Pike burst into the room and fell to his knees beside the bed. Olivia held out their son, a red-faced, squalling bundle with dark hair already showing Pike's wave. "Meet your son," she said, exhausted but radiant. Pike took the baby with shaking hands, this strong man who could fell trees and fight off bears, reduced to trembling awe by 7 pounds of new life. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for this gift." They named him Peter James Voss, and he was the image of his father from the start. As he grew, it became clear he had inherited Pike's strength and quiet disposition, though Olivia's green eyes looked out from his small face. Pike was a devoted father, carrying Peter everywhere in a sling he fashioned himself, teaching him about the desert and mountains, singing him old songs Pike remembered from his own childhood. 2 years later, their daughter arrived, a tiny thing they named Ophelia Rose. She had Olivia's auburn hair and Pike's gray eyes, and from her first breath she was fierce and determined. She kept them up at night with imperious demands and won their hearts completely with her toothless grins. The boarding house rang with the sound of children's laughter, and their lodgers good-naturedly tolerated the patter of small feet overhead and the occasional toy soldier left on the stairs. Pike and Olivia's happiness was evident to everyone who saw them, the way they moved around each other in perfect sync, the small touches and shared smiles that spoke of deep, abiding love. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Pike took Olivia up to the mountains for a rare overnight trip, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen, who was delighted to babysit. He led her to a beautiful meadow where aspens trembled in the breeze and wildflowers carpeted the ground. They made camp beside a crystal stream, and as the sun set, Pike pulled Olivia into his arms. "Do you remember the day we met?" he asked. "Every detail," Olivia said, resting her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I was so scared and lost, and then there you were. I think about that day often, how close I came to never meeting you at all. If those bandits had not robbed the stage, if the wheel had not broken, if you had passed by my trading post without stopping." He tightened his arms around her. "The thought terrifies me. But none of that happened. We found each other, Pike. Against all odds, in the middle of nowhere, we found each other." "Best thing that ever happened to me," he said. "Every morning I wake up next to you, I still cannot quite believe my luck. A woman like you, loving a rough man like me." Olivia pulled back to look at him, taking his bearded face in her hands. "You are not rough. You are strong and gentle and good. You are the best man I have ever known. And I thank God every day that stagecoach broke down and brought me to you." They made love under the stars that night, reaffirming their commitment with bodies and whispered words. Afterward, wrapped in blankets by the fire, Pike held Olivia close and thought about how empty his life had been before her, how cold his existence in those lonely mountains. She had brought warmth and meaning and purpose to his days, had given him children and a home and a reason to greet each morning with joy rather than mere endurance. "I love you," he said into her hair, "more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too," Olivia murmured sleepily. "My mountain man, my whole heart." The years continued to pass in a blur of happiness and hard work. Peter grew into a serious boy who loved working with his hands like his father, while Ophelia was all fire and spirit, demanding stories and adventures and testing boundaries with fearless determination. In 1891, they were joined by another son, Paul William, who had his mother's temperament and a sweet nature that made him everyone's favorite. The boarding house prospered beyond their early dreams. They employed 2 young women from town to help with the cleaning and cooking, and Pike hired a handyman to manage repairs so he could spend more time with his growing family. They became pillars of the Oatman community, known for their generosity and fair dealings. When the town needed a new schoolhouse, Pike organized the building effort and Olivia coordinated fundraising. When fire destroyed the livery stable, they provided free housing for the displaced family until they could rebuild. On a warm evening in the summer of 1895, 12 years after that fateful stagecoach robbery, Pike and Olivia sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Peter, now 8, was showing 6-year-old Ophelia how to whittle, while 4-year-old Paul chased fireflies with more enthusiasm than success. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the mountains stood dark against the brilliant colors. "Do you ever think about that day?" Olivia asked, her hand in Pike's. "The robbery?" "Sometimes," Pike admitted. "I think about those bandits taking everything from you, and I want to find them and make them answer for it. But then, I think about how that robbery brought you to my trading post, brought you into my life, and I almost want to thank them." Olivia laughed. "You do not mean that." "Do I not?" He brought her hand to his lips. "Everything good in my life started the day you walked through my door looking lost and brave. Our children, this business, this family we have built, none of it would exist without that terrible morning." "I suppose that is true." Olivia watched Peter gently correct Ophelia's grip on the knife, patient and protective like his father. "I lost $43.18 that day, best money I ever spent." "You did not spend it. They stole it." "Same result. It brought me to you." She turned to look at her husband, this mountain man who had given her so much more than a gold coin and credit for supplies. He had given her his strength when she was weak, his hope when she had none, his love when she needed it most. "You saved my life that day, Pike Voss." "No," Pike said seriously. "You saved mine. I was just existing before you, Olivia, getting through the days, doing what needed to be done, but not really living. You taught me how to live again. You and these children, you are my purpose, my reason, my everything." "We are quite the pair then," Olivia said softly. "2 lost souls who found each other in the middle of the Arizona desert." "Best thing about being lost," Pike said, pulling her close, "is the joy of being found." They sat together as the sun finished setting and the stars began to emerge, listening to their children's laughter, secure in the knowledge that their love had built something lasting and true. The stagecoach had been robbed of every penny that day 12 years ago, but it had delivered something far more valuable to Pike Voss's door. A woman with auburn hair and green eyes who saw past his rough exterior to the lonely heart beneath, who trusted him enough to accept his help, who loved him enough to build a life with him. Pike had given her his last coin and told her it was not charity, but investment. He had not known then how right he was, how that single gold eagle would multiply into riches beyond counting. Laughter in the hallways, tiny hands reaching for his, green eyes meeting his across the breakfast table every morning, the profound contentment of knowing he was exactly where he belonged. In the end, those bandits had stolen $43.18 from Olivia Dawson, but in doing so, they had inadvertently given her everything: a home, a purpose, a family, and a mountain man's whole heart, freely given and never reclaimed, beating in time with hers for all the days of their lives. As the children finally tired and came running to the porch for good-night hugs, Pike gathered his family close and silently thanked whatever providence had broken that stagecoach wheel and brought Olivia into his life. She smiled at him over Paul's head, and in her eyes he saw reflected his own deep contentment, the bone-deep satisfaction of a love well chosen and a life well lived. The mountains stood eternal against the darkening sky, witnesses to their story, guardians of the valley that had become home. And on the porch of the Brennan boarding house, Pike Voss held his world in his arms and knew that he was, without question, the richest man in the Arizona territory. Not in gold or silver or coin, but in the currency that truly mattered: love freely given and fully returned, multiplied across the years into a fortune that would last forever. The stars came out one by one, ancient lights watching over a family forged from hardship and hope, from a robbery and a broken wheel, from a mountain man's generosity and a city girl's courage. Their love story would be told in Oatman for generations, the tale of how Pike Voss gave Olivia Dawson his last coin and his whole heart, and received in return a lifetime of happiness that no bandit could ever steal away. Years continued to unfold with the same blessed contentment. Peter grew into a young man who apprenticed with the town blacksmith, showing his father's skill with tools and steady temperament. Ophelia became a force of nature, organizing the other children in elaborate games and adventures, already showing signs of the strong woman she would become. Paul remained their sweet-natured child, always ready with a hug or a kind word, gravitating toward books and learning in a way that reminded Pike of Olivia. In 1897, when Peter turned 10, Pike took him on his first extended trip into the mountains, teaching him to track and hunt and survive in the wilderness. They were gone for a week, and when they returned, Peter had shot his first deer and gained 3 inches of sunburn and a lifetime of stories. More importantly, he had spent hours talking with his father around the campfire, hearing stories about the war and the lonely years after, understanding more deeply the man Pike had been and the man he had become. "Mother changed everything for you, did she not?" Peter asked on their last night in the mountains. Pike poked at the fire, choosing his words carefully. "She did. I thought I was content being alone, but I was lying to myself. I was just existing, not living. Your mother taught me the difference." "How did you know she was the one?" "The moment I saw her." Pike looked at his son across the flames. "I know that sounds like something from a story, but it is the truth. She stepped down from that stagecoach looking exhausted and scared, but still standing straight, still fighting, and something in my chest just recognized her. Like my heart knew her before my mind caught up." Peter absorbed this thoughtfully. "I hope I find someone like that someday." "You will," Pike said with certainty. "Good people attract good people. You are already becoming a fine man, Peter. When the right woman comes along, she will see that." The conversation stayed with Pike as they rode home, making him realize how quickly his children were growing, how finite and precious this time was. He resolved to cherish every moment, to be present and engaged, to give his children the stability and love his own family had been cut too short to provide. Back at the boarding house, Olivia had not been idle. She had started offering piano lessons to the town children, dusting off skills she had not used since leaving Boston. The boarding house parlor filled with music in the afternoons, scales and simple melodies played with varying degrees of skill. Ophelia proved to be naturally talented, her small fingers flying over the keys with confidence and flair. Paul was more methodical, practicing diligently until he could play simple hymns for church services. The family fell into comfortable rhythms, seasons marked by the work that defined them. Spring meant planting the kitchen garden and refreshing the boarding house after the winter. Summer brought the height of the mining season and their busiest time with lodgers. Fall was for preserving food and preparing for the cold months ahead. Winter meant cozy evenings around the fire, Pike telling stories while Olivia sewed and the children played or read. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1893, Pike commissioned a portrait of the family from a traveling artist who had set up temporary shop in Oatman. They dressed in their finest clothes and sat for hours as the artist captured them. Pike standing behind Olivia's chair, his hand on her shoulder, looking steadfast and protective. Olivia seated with Paul on her lap, her face serene and content. Peter and Ophelia standing on either side, growing tall and strong like saplings reaching for the sun. When the portrait was finished, Pike hung it in their bedroom where they could see it every morning and evening. Sometimes he would catch Olivia looking at it with tears in her eyes, overcome by gratitude for the life they had built together. "What are you thinking?" he asked one night, finding her studying the portrait by lamplight. "I'm thinking about the girl I was when I came here," Olivia said. "So scared and alone, convinced my life was over. If I could go back and tell her what waited for her, what happiness she would find, I do not think she would believe me." Pike wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. That girl was already strong enough to survive anything. She just needed someone to remind her of that. "She needed you," Olivia corrected, leaning back against his solid warmth. "I needed you, Pike. I still need you." "Good," he rumbled, "because I'm not going anywhere. You are stuck with me for the rest of our lives." "Best news I have heard all day," Olivia said, turning in his arms to kiss him. Their love had matured over the years, growing deeper and richer with shared experiences and weathered challenges. They had nursed each other through illnesses, comforted each other through losses like the death of Chester, the stagecoach driver who had become a friend. They had celebrated victories together, like when the boarding house won recognition from the territorial government for excellence in hospitality, or when Peter won the blue ribbon at the county fair for his carpentry project. They had also weathered conflicts, as any couple does. Pike's protective instincts sometimes clashed with Olivia's independent nature. Her tendency to overwork herself worried him constantly. His habit of taking on everyone's problems sometimes left him exhausted. But they had learned to navigate these differences, to communicate and compromise, to choose understanding over being right. "Marriage is work," Olivia told Mrs. Chen one afternoon over tea. "But it is the best kind of work because you are building something beautiful together." "You and Pike make it look easy," Mrs. Chen observed. "And it is not easy," Olivia said honestly, "but it is worth it. Every day it is worth it." In 1898, tragedy struck Oatman in the form of a mining accident that killed 3 men and injured a dozen more. Pike worked tirelessly with the rescue efforts, his mountain skills and strength invaluable in extracting trapped miners. Olivia turned the boarding house into a makeshift hospital, caring for the injured until the doctor could see to everyone. She held the hands of dying men and wrote letters to their families, her heart breaking for all the potential lost, all the futures cut short. One of the men who died was barely 20, a boy from Ohio who had come west seeking his fortune. He had no family, no one to claim his body or mourn his passing. Pike and Olivia arranged his funeral and paid for his headstone, making sure he was not forgotten. That night, lying in bed, Pike held Olivia as she cried for the young man and all the others lost to the dangerous work of mining. "Life is so fragile," she whispered, "so precious and fragile." "Which is why we have to hold tight to the people we love," Pike said, "why we have to make every day count." They both held their children a little closer after that, treasured each ordinary moment a little more deeply. The accident served as a stark reminder that nothing was guaranteed, that the happiness they had built could be swept away in an instant. It made them more intentional about their time together, more willing to say the words that mattered. "I love you" became something they said multiple times a day, not out of habit, but from genuine feeling. They taught their children to do the same, to express affection openly and often, because life was too uncertain to leave love unspoken. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. Oatman organized a New Year's festival for December 31st, 1899, and the whole family attended. Pike danced with Olivia under the stars while their children watched and giggled. Peter, now 12 and growing into his father's build, asked a pretty girl named Sarah to dance and blushed furiously when she said yes. Ophelia and Paul joined the other children in a game of tag that ranged across the whole town square. As midnight approached and people gathered to count down to 1900, Pike pulled Olivia away from the crowd, finding a quiet spot behind the church where they could be alone. "A new century," he said, gazing at the stars. Hard to believe. 17 years ago, if someone had told me I would welcome the 20th century in Arizona with a husband and 3 children, I would have thought they were insane, Olivia said. I was supposed to spend my whole life in Boston teaching piano to wealthy children, living quietly and alone. No regrets? Not a single one. She laced her fingers through his. You gave me a life beyond anything I imagined, Pike. Adventure and purpose and love. So much love. From the town square came the sound of people counting down. 10, 9, 8. Pike turned Olivia to face him, his hands cupping her face like he had that first time he kissed her. 7, 6, 5. Her eyes shone in the starlight, green as spring grass, full of joy and contentment. 4, 3, 2. To the next century, Pike whispered. To us, Olivia replied. 1. And as the town erupted in cheers and the new century began, Pike kissed his wife with all the passion and tenderness of a love that had endured and deepened, a love that would last as long as they both drew breath. They returned to the celebration to find their children waiting, and the whole family embraced, a tight knot of affection and belonging. Whatever the new century brought, they would face it together, strengthened by the bonds they had forged and the love that sustained them. The years of the early 1900s brought growth and change to both Oatman and the Voss family. The town expanded as more people moved west, drawn by mining opportunities and the promise of fresh starts. New businesses opened, including a proper hotel that competed with the boarding house for customers. But Olivia had built such a strong reputation for excellent food and warm hospitality that their rooms stayed consistently full. Peter finished his apprenticeship and opened his own carpentry shop at age 18, showing remarkable skill at furniture making. His pieces became sought after throughout the territory, sturdy and beautiful, practical art for practical people. He married his sweetheart Sarah in 1905, and Pike felt his throat tighten as he watched his son pledge his life to a young woman, remembering when he had done the same. Ophelia proved to be as headstrong as they had anticipated, announcing at 15 that she intended to become a teacher. Olivia supported her daughter's ambitions, even as Pike worried about her facing the roughness of frontier life alone. But Ophelia had inherited his strength and her mother's determination, a formidable combination that made her unstoppable when she set her mind to something. Paul surprised them all by developing an interest in medicine. After reading about the mining accident that had so affected his parents, he became determined to learn how to help people. At 16, he began studying with the town doctor, showing both aptitude and compassion that made everyone confident he would become an excellent physician. Pike and Olivia watched their children becoming adults with mixed emotions, pride in who they were becoming, but also bittersweet awareness that the years of them all being together under one roof were ending. They held each other a little tighter in the night, finding comfort in the constancy of their love even as everything else changed. In 1907, Sarah gave birth to Peter and her first child, making Pike and Olivia grandparents. The baby, a girl they named Emma, had Olivia's auburn hair and Pike's gray eyes, and from her first moment, she owned both their hearts completely. Pike was 54 years old, his dark hair now threaded with silver, his face lined from years in the Arizona sun, but holding his granddaughter made him feel young again, filled with wonder at the continuation of their family line. She is perfect, Olivia whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. Just perfect. Pike looked at his wife, his daughter-in-law, his son, and his granddaughter, 4 generations of a family he had helped create, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. All of this had started with a broken stagecoach wheel, and a woman with green eyes who had walked into his life and changed everything. They settled into the rhythm of grandparenting, Peter and Sarah bringing Emma to visit several times a week. Pike made toys for her, simple wooden animals, and blocks that showed his skill and love. Olivia sewed tiny dresses and sang lullabies, delighting in this new phase of life. Ophelia left for teacher's college in 1908, kissing her parents goodbye at the train station with tears streaming down her face despite her excitement. I will make you proud, she promised. You already have, Pike told her, pulling her into a crushing hug. Every single day of your life, you have made us proud. Paul continued his medical studies, showing exceptional promise, The town doctor predicted he would be ready to take over the practice within a few years, ensuring Oatman would have excellent medical care for the next generation. As Pike entered his late 50s, he began to slow down slightly, the accumulated years of hard work taking their toll. His knees ached on cold mornings, and he could not lift quite as much as he once had. But he was still strong, still capable, still the rock his family depended on. Olivia, approaching 50, remained beautiful in his eyes, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, her face lined with laugh lines that spoke of a life well lived. She had filled out slightly over the years, softer and more comfortable in her body, still graceful in the way she moved through their home. One evening in late 1910, they sat on the porch, as they had so many evenings before, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. 27 years had passed since that fateful day when the stagecoach had been robbed and Olivia had stumbled into Pike's life. "Do you remember," Olivia said softly, "that first night after we met? I lay in bed at the boarding house and thought about you. I told myself I was being foolish, that you were just being kind, that nothing could come of it. What changed your mind? You did. You kept showing up, kept helping, kept looking at me like I was something precious. You made me believe that good things could happen, even after everything bad." She turned to look at him. "You saved me, Pike Voss, in every way a person can be saved." "No," Pike said, taking her hand. "We saved each other. I was lost in those mountains, Olivia, lost in my own head, in the past, in loneliness I did not even recognize anymore because it was all I knew. You showed me what life could be, what I could be. You gave me purpose and family and joy." "Then we are even," Olivia said with a smile. "Not even close," Pike brought her hand to his lips. "You will always be ahead in that particular accounting. You gave me 3 incredible children and now a granddaughter. You built a home that became the heart of this community. You loved me even when I did not deserve it, even when I was difficult or distant or stubborn. You were never any of those things." "I was all of them at various times," Pike said honestly, "but you loved me anyway. That is the miracle, Olivia. Not that we found each other, though that was unlikely enough. The miracle is that you chose to stay, to build a life with a rough mountain man who barely knew how to live in society anymore." "You are not rough," Olivia said, echoing words she had spoken so many years ago. "You are the gentlest man I know. Strong, yes. Protective, absolutely. But never rough, not where it counts." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finished setting and the first stars appeared. From inside the boarding house came the sound of their current lodgers settling in for the evening, the familiar rhythms of a business that had sustained them for nearly 3 decades. "I want you to know something," Pike said suddenly. "If I could go back to that day when your stagecoach stopped at my trading post, if I could see the future and know everything that would happen, all the joy and challenges and ordinary moments, I would not change a single thing. I would still give you that gold coin. I would still offer credit. I would still fall in love with you that very first day." Tears slipped down Olivia's cheeks. "I would not change anything either. Not the robbery, not the fear, not the uncertainty. It all led me to you, and that makes every hard moment worth it." Pike pulled her close, and they sat wrapped in each other's arms as the night deepened around them. They had faced storms together, both literal and figurative. They had buried friends and celebrated births. They had watched their children grow and begin families of their own. Through it all, their love had remained constant, the foundation everything else was built upon. In 1912, Ophelia returned to Oatman after completing her education, immediately securing a position teaching at the town school. She moved back into the boarding house temporarily while looking for her own place, filling the home with her energy and enthusiasm. She was 25 now, a confident young woman who knew her own mind, and Pike saw both himself and Olivia in her fierce independence tempered by deep compassion. Paul graduated from his medical studies that same year and officially took over the medical practice when the old doctor retired. At 21, he was the youngest doctor in the territory, but his skill and gentle manner with patients quickly won over any skeptics. Pike and Olivia attended his graduation ceremony, sitting in the front row and beaming with pride as their youngest child received his medical degree. Peter and Sarah welcomed their second child in 1913, a boy they named James. Pike held his grandson and marveled at the continuation of his family line, this tiny person who carried part of his legacy forward into the future. He taught young Emma to fish and track animals in the hills around Oatman, passing on the wilderness skills that had sustained him through the dark years after the war. As Pike approached 60, he began to think about legacy and what he wanted to leave behind. The boarding house would pass to their children eventually, a thriving business they could continue or sell as they saw fit. But more than material wealth, Pike hoped he had given them something deeper. An understanding of integrity and hard work, of treating people fairly and standing by your word, of the fundamental importance of family and love. "You have given them all that and more," Olivia assured him when he voiced these thoughts. "Look at them, Pike. Peter is raising his children with the same values you showed him. Ophelia is teaching the next generation not just reading and arithmetic, but kindness and respect. Paul heals people with skill and compassion. They are exactly who they are because of you." "Because of us," Pike corrected. "I may have provided the example, but you gave them the love that made them feel safe enough to grow into themselves. They were partners in the truest sense, complementing each other's strengths and supporting each other's weaknesses." Pike's steady strength balanced Olivia's occasional tendency to worry. Her social skills and warmth made up for his sometimes gruff exterior. Together, they created something neither could have achieved alone, a family and legacy that would endure long after they were gone. In 1915, 32 years after they met, Pike and Olivia celebrated another milestone, the boarding house's 30th anniversary under family ownership. The whole town turned out for the party, recognizing the Voss family's contribution to Oatman's growth and prosperity. Current and former lodgers gave speeches about Olivia's excellent cooking and Pike's fair dealing. The mayor presented them with a plaque honoring their service to the community. But the moment Pike treasured most came later that night when their children gathered in the parlor. Peter stood with Sarah and their two children. Ophelia sat with her beau, a fellow teacher she would marry the following year. Paul arrived straight from the medical office, tired but happy. They raised glasses in a toast to their parents, voices blending in love and gratitude. "To the two people who showed us what love looks like," Peter said, "who taught us that strength and gentleness can coexist, that hard work builds character, and that family is everything. We love you both more than words can say." Pike found himself unable to speak, his throat too tight with emotion. Olivia took his hand and answered for both of them. "We love you too, all of you. You are our greatest achievement, our proudest legacy. Everything good in our lives flows from the family we have built together." Later, alone in their bedroom, Pike and Olivia prepared for sleep with the comfortable familiarity of 3 decades together. He watched her brush out her hair, now more silver than auburn, and marveled that she was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "What are you staring at?" Olivia asked, catching his reflection in the mirror. "My wife, my life, my everything." She turned to him, setting down the brush. "You are such a romantic, Pike Voss. Who would have thought the stern mountain man had such poetry in his soul?" "You brought it out of me," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Before you, I had forgotten how to feel anything but pain and loneliness. You taught me to hope again, to love again, to believe in good things." They climbed into bed, and Olivia nestled against his side, her head on his chest where she could hear his heart beating. This position had become their default over the years, comfortable and comforting, a physical manifestation of their emotional intimacy. "Pike?" she murmured sleepily. "Yes, love? If I had it all to do over, I would still get on that stagecoach. I would still let those bandits take every penny. Because all of it, every moment of fear and uncertainty, led me here to you. And there is nowhere else I would rather be." Pike kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender soap. "Go to sleep, Olivia. I will be right here when you wake up. I will always be right here." She drifted off quickly, exhausted from the long day of celebration. Pike stayed awake longer, listening to her breathing, feeling the weight of her against him, overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built. A stagecoach robbery that could have been the worst day of her life had instead become the beginning of everything good. He had given her his last coin and his whole heart, and she had given him purpose, family, and a love that transcended anything he had ever imagined possible. The years had been kind to them, granting them health and happiness, children and grandchildren, success and security. But none of that mattered as much as this: the simple pleasure of holding his wife as she slept, knowing she was safe and loved and exactly where she belonged. Pike Voss had been a soldier, a wanderer, a mountain man living in isolation. But the day Olivia Dawson walked into his trading post with green eyes full of determination and fear, he had finally become the man he was meant to be. A husband, a father, a grandfather, a pillar of his community, all because he had offered kindness to a stranger and received the entire world in return. As sleep finally claimed him, Pike's last conscious thought was a prayer of thanksgiving for broken stagecoach wheels, for bandits who unwittingly changed the course of lives, for every twist of fate that had brought him to this moment. In the morning, he would wake beside his wife, and they would face another day together, adding to the thousands they had already shared, and the thousands more they hoped to have. The mountains stood guard outside their window, ancient and eternal, witnesses to a love story that had started with loss and generosity and grown into something beautiful and enduring. The stagecoach had been robbed of every penny that day so long ago, but Pike Voss had given Olivia Dawson his last coin and his whole heart, and in return received riches beyond measure, a lifetime of love, freely given and wholly returned, multiplied across the years into a legacy that would echo through generations. And in the end, that was everything.